Hey everybody, today I'm going to be reviewing Badlands. This film came out in 1973. It was directed by Terrence Malick. Malick is part of a generation of American filmmakers, auteur American filmmakers, that really rose to prominence mainly in the late 1960s and into the early and mid 1970s. And I think he's one of the most mysterious yet extremely compelling figures of that time. This was his very first film, his first feature-length film, and it is a very unique experience. It is one of those classic examples where I think you definitely need to see it more than once for it to really sink in and for it to resonate. It has a very elusive quality to it, naturally. Most Terrence Malick films do, and it certainly leaves an impression, or at least it did for me. His films are very unadorned, it seems. They're very naturalistic and very poetic. Some might say pretentious, and I think, to a degree, at certain points in his career, yeah, you could certainly make that argument, but I think when he's at his best, all of it's coming together in a way that I think really is honest to him, very true to the spirit. You watch his films for the experience of it, not necessarily for the narrative, not necessarily for the character motivations, pretty much ever. Like his movies are, to me, it's like experiencing waves of like fluctuating sensations, and that's what it's more interested in exploring, more kind of the sensory moments. It is much less cerebral. He's so detail-oriented, and I think, it's because he sees the world in a certain way, and I think that's why it's why it takes him so long in between projects to really develop an idea, because he's catching a feeling, and he really, really wants to let it marinate so that it means something. His movies are very nostalgic. They deal a lot with memory and memory distortion, and he grew up in Texas, and you see a lot of that kind of 1950s suburban worlds in his movies that likely come from his own experiences. And that nostalgia is a key point, because it's very much something we all relate to and something that we're all touched by. So to me, a lot of his movies are about how it resonates with us so deeply, and yet those memories and everything that we are so easily obliterated when it comes to the immensity of space, the immensity of existence. Badlands is a first film, and it feels like a first film, but I don't mean that in a bad way. I just mean in terms of the simplicity. It's capturing a sort of youthful exuberance, which is a good place, I think, to start for a lot of directors. And this movie, I think, reflects a certain time in one's life where you feel all kinds of things, and you're very lost. You don't know who you are, you don't know who you want to be, and you might feel things that society might deem unacceptable, and you don't know why you're feeling them. And that's really just what this movie is capturing. It is a very spacey, very intuitive sort of movie, and like I said, less psychological, and we really don't know what motivates the characters at the center of the film. We never find out. All of that is just kind of left for us to interpret ourselves, I suppose. And yet it works for me. It feels, just very much like a strange, very intrinsic snapshot of youth. Malick films to me feel almost like old photographs that can breathe. Or something like that. It feels like old houses from the 1950s. It's like you can smell everything, like, aged wood in an old house, and like the creaks of the floorboards. They mean something more. When you go to your grandmother's house or something, and it has that kind of, moldy but like dusty, intoxicating scent, it's like I can smell that when I'm watching his films. And he captures all of it with just this extraordinary ethereal mysticism. And when you recall memory, it's fleeting, it's often in flashes, it's often in images, but it's also quite distorted. That's the point. It's a memory. And he captures it all, I think, with just a really extraordinary ethereal mysticism. And, when you're recalling memories just in your life, they tend to be very fleeting. They come in images, they could come in smells, but they're always very distorted because they're memories. And when you recall a beautiful memory from your childhood, from your youth at some point, it naturally tends to resonate more, because that perspective and that distance really allows mortality to sink in, as I've said many times, and suddenly the preciousness of life suddenly feels so much more meaningful. And that's the power of Malick films for me, not necessarily exploring the meaning behind memories necessarily, but reflecting the feeling of memories and just the feeling of all these images that come to our brain. And it's sort of a meditation on life. Even though there is a real beauty to the film, all the images in Malick films are gorgeous, there is a feeling of death, especially in this movie, that's just hovering over everything. And not necessarily in a dark way, just in a natural way. There's a natural progression that's going to happen in this movie. It's about two foolish people and you pretty much know what's going to happen to them at the end of the movie. They want to live their way, their lives their way, and don't really know why. They're just living in the moment, but often being an outcast to society, rejecting society does have its consequences, and it certainly has its sacrifices. And when you're young and impulsive and you make bad decisions, you create a mess typically, and you run from it. And you keep running from it. You run from your responsibilities. You run from your identity. You run from your own mortality in a sense, and you're in a denial, as if none of it matters, none of it exists to you. I am a huge fan of both Martin Sheen and Sissy Spacek. I think they are so perfect in their two respective roles here. Sheen does have just a wonderful kind of rugged, matinee boyish quality. You know, he's referred to as looking like James Dean, and I'd say that's, you know, somewhat accurate. He has a hardness to him and a depth, and he seems wise beyond his years in a lot of ways. And Sissy Spacek, you know, everyone knows she's one of my all-time favorite actresses. She has something really very unique and cinematic about her face. She's like this beautiful, haunting alien, and she is so young here, so young in this movie. I think she was about 24 years old, and she has an amazing quality as an actress, but she can really play very young, naive, very impressionable, yet she has something seething underneath. An intensity and, like I said, an otherworldly quality to her that really stands out, and I think that's a very interesting dichotomy. But here she's really just playing who she was in real life, you know, a very young, innocent Texan girl. And, you know, Sissy is from Texas, and she's got that Texas drawl, and she's got a very high, hopeful voice. Kind of, you know, empty-headed with no real reason for anything. She doesn't have that much to say. He doesn't have that much to say. They seem almost completely clueless about the immensity of their crimes, as if detached from the idea of consequence and existence entirely, just like floating through life as ghosts, not really bound by time. Some might say that the aimlessness of these characters and all of that may not work for them, and that the thinness of the story and everything leaves something to be desired for them. But for me, it works really well, again, because it's exploring more the sensory experience in a different way than maybe you're used to. It's about just letting things exist and flow. You know, it feels like there's no backwards, no forwards, just now. It's very much like a road trip, and the feeling you get on a road trip. Because, you know, this is a road trip movie, and from what I understand, it was conceived by Terrence Malick while he was on a road trip. And to me, road trips are one of the best metaphors for that existential exploration within yourself. There are classic Terrence Malick staples here that we see very early on that he would carry throughout his career. And, you know, a lot of it, of course, as I've said, has to do with the cinematography, the imagery. There are a lot of staples that you will recognize early on that are carried throughout Malick's career that become quite iconic for him. And of course, you know, one I mentioned is the cinematography, often paired with like poetic whispering and always accompanied by contemporary classical music. And Malick films have some of the best music selections ever. Always on point. And that impressionism is, like I say, very tangible, but it also doesn't quite feel real in a lot of ways. And even when you experience memories, especially if it's a really intense memory, it seems more real than it did originally, more exaggerated. And depending on your relationship with it, you know, you're going to naturally distort it. It's more, like I said, about the flow. It's a collage of different memories and emotions that just kind of feel more honest and true to life. Because this movie is a recollection. It's told from the point of view of Sissy Spacek looking back on it. And, you know, a lot of times the big moments in this movie that would normally be very climactic don't really build much to anything. And the small moments where nothing is happening, suddenly you feel the weight of it. Because again, it's often the smallest moments, just like, you know, you smell a pie baking, and it's the one you grew up with. You know, your grandmother made it for you every Christmas, and it'll just hit you. The memories hit you like a ton of bricks. Just those little sensory details that the mind latches onto that I think Terrence Malick captures better than almost anybody in terms of how it can translate to a cinematic experience. And I mentioned how natural the film is as well. Malick loves to incorporate nature into his films, which I love because I also incorporate a lot of nature into my own aesthetic. But again, it's that contrast. You know, there's something very beautiful about it, as well as very unforgiving about nature. You see in the movie a lot of humans kind of carelessly treating animals in a brutal way. At the beginning of the movie, there's like a montage where you're cutting between Sissy Spacek and Martin Sheen, and you see the cow and all of that. And then there's a scene where Sissy is applying her makeup in a mirror, and it cuts to, like, you know, I think you see like a chicken in a cage, the way she tosses the fish. When her dog gets shot, there isn't much emotional attachment, which is crazy normally in movies. If a dog dies, a pet dies like that, you know, it gets the boomer treatment from Independence Day. But it's met with so little emotion, and I think that's the point of it. It's you know, a broader context of the frailty of life, the fragility of life mixed with just casual interaction. And this film is just, it's fleeting existence. That's what it's about to me, or what it contains. It's running from things that force existence to sink in for you in any way. And that epic scope of the film that's contrasted with things that seem so small and insignificant, that can be quite powerful. There's a moment, an image that really stuck out to me. It's an image of like farmland. It's just endless, going all the way to the horizon. And you see here in the foreground, you see Martin Sheen and Sissy Spacek. And you know, they're just throwing rocks at each other. They're just messing around, having fun, in love, not really paying attention to anything. And of course, we know what's happening. The guy recognizes who they are, and he is running to go tell the cops. And they're clueless to it, at least at first. And you know, that idea is very much who they are as a couple. And yet, just that image of this land going all the way to the end, it almost looks like a void. It swallows them. It's so big compared to how small they are. They could just be swallowed with no trace, and really in the big scheme of things, in the big schemes of the universe, it doesn't really matter. And you know, we aren't particularly significant, and yet we struggle to find meaning in life that is all encompassing. I wouldn't say this is my favorite film of Terrence Malick, but I think it is a very, very strong film. And certainly if you are a fan of his, this is, I think, essential viewing. And, you know, as I said, it does feel a bit elusive at times. You might struggle with maybe the motivation or the emotional connection to it, especially if this is your first Malick movie. But I think it's, again, if you watch it more and more, you'll find more that resonates with you, more that is effective. You stop looking for meaning in the things you think you're supposed to, and you start finding meaning in the things that you least expect. And that to me is just an incredibly powerful thing to be able to express in art. But that is my review. Thank you guys so much for watching. All of my Patreon supporters are here. Thank you guys again so much. If you like art and you like supporting artists, I am an artist as well, and I have a website. It's deepfocuslens.com. I have a link below. I do commission portraits, pencil sketches, and prints I have on sale. If you are interested, you can always email me if you have any questions. If you're interested in a commission or a print, just let me know. Happy to work with you. Other than that, all of my social media information is below. You can watch more videos here, and you can subscribe if you'd like. Catch you next time.